article, exchange your article, get some notes, and get some feedback. Discuss what you learned, what you didn't learn, and then we'll come back together at 7:10. Some of you had problems opening up the article, and you only were able to read the abstract. That's perfectly fine. It's the article itself is about 20 pages long, and I expected most of the essence of what you needed to know was in that paragraph. If you had any problems with it and you couldn't open it at all, just in the future, just let me know. I can email you the PDFs, or I can copy and paste the article. So if you have any problems in the future, just let me know. Some of you did that, some of you didn't, and for the future, now you know what to do. But for today, just go meet someone that you haven't met, introduce yourself, get to know that person, and exchange your article and get some critique. And the sign-in sheet is going around. Make sure you sign in. All right, we'll be back at 7:10.
Hi, Rachel. Since I've shown up.
My name's Guy.
What is it?
Guy.
Guy.
Yeah, I'm just auditing this class. So.
You're auditing?
Yeah, so I'm already doing it.
Sweet.
What about yourself?
I'm enrolled in the class. I need an extra upper div business student.
Oh, I see.
I think I read the wrong article or something too. I was looking at the old version of the tell if it was like, would this article just be for it is due on this day? And there was one I did have trouble opening, so I was like, I'll just do the other one. And now I've got
What year are you?
I'm a senior.
Senior. So have you been here for the whole 4 years, or you
I transferred.
Where from?
So Apple Valley College, community college, about 20 minutes from here.
Oh, okay, cool. Loads of people do that.
What was that?
Loads of people transfer.
Oh, yeah. It's a pretty big chunk of the class. Definitely not majority, but find like a transfer buddy wherever I go.
So yeah, my flatmate, all my roommates teach something. I live in a place called Western House,
Oh, okay.
opposite the RSM.
Oh, okay. I know of it. What's your last name?
You probably won't know. He's a junior.
It sounds very familiar. Probably not. I don't know.
I've met so many transfers. Did you transfer when you were a junior? Is that the only time you transfer?
Yeah.
You can't transfer as a senior? Oh, I see. So what are you studying? Business. Are you in Haas? And my major is international business. So I'm an exchange. Yeah, the whole year. Hopefully over summer as well. Pardon?
I'm guessing you're exchange from
Yes. University of Leeds.
Leeds.
Do you know it?
I'm somewhat familiar. I spent
Whereabouts?
Buchanan.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Oh, no.
But I was there for quite a while.
What did you think of it? What did you think of it? Not as good as California.
It's very green.
Yeah, it is.
It rains a lot.
Yeah, sums it up. Really.
Yeah, it was weird being like the summer I was there was like constant. I've been there in like 4 years.
Oh wow.
In the high 80s and like so humid, and then just like every day it's like pouring rain.
Yeah.
Like,
So why did you take this class?
I'm French.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, so I'm just kind of taking whatever and figure it out.
Have you done any internship during your
Yes, I've had an internship for over a year now in St. Louis.
where's that?
It's called Serve. It's a company that do ticketing software for like tour movies and stuff. It's just
Oh, cool.
yeah. It's
What's it called?
Good.
Yeah, so are they a big company?
What?
Are they a big company? So do they run an official internship program?
They do.
I might look into it. I really want to do a summer internship.
Yeah, it's really chill. I just go to work dressed like this.
Yeah.
And just like,
That's cool.
it's chill.
What's your role?
I'm an account management and operations assistant. I do I do SEO kind of stuff for our sellers that we work with. And then, yeah, a lot of, I wear a different hat every day. So there's no way to just like sum it up, but recently I've been doing a lot of like SEO consulting.
I've never done any SEO before.
It's fun. I mean, I enjoy it a lot.
What does it entail?
What I do a lot of is like I've done some copywriting and then just a lot of like how to like optimize pages for crawlers. So like what text to include, like how the HTML to be built out on a page. I don't know a lot about it, but I know just like really
Have you done like computer science modules or anything? So you don't need to do.
No, not really. I basically like my work just kind of gave me like a sheet of just like what you need to know, and then there's like an expanded version with like all the HTML kind of stuff, but I don't really need to go into it. Most of the people that we work with are not too savvy anyway, so like explaining that to them would be pointless. So just try to give them like as basic as possible. But like help them out as much as we can when they call in like, I'm on my website and now I'm not on the anymore. What the hell happened? Help me.
So are you going to like work for them full time? Are you going to work full time?
I don't know. I mean, I've been there for over a year, so they don't give you like a full time off, right? Like not internship, like one of other companies do. But I'm still kind of figuring out what I want anyway. So I've also been considering like building tech companies that are larger, and then like adding internships. Yeah. Definitely not like the typical business track of like accounting.
I'm more interested in like the marketing.
Yeah.
You can actually have fun.
Right. I've been taking each grade when I'm 6.
I can kind of just pick whatever classes I want. I'm not actually taking any Haas this semester. I was going to. So.
Okay, everyone, we can come back together.
Innovation, entrepreneurship, urban field study where you're just walking around taking photos.
All right, everyone, come back to your seats,
It's all past no
and
pass.
we can get things rolling. So you'll notice this nice orb right here. We recently got sponsorship from Google, and we now have a camera and a microphone that will help us live stream all of our speakers from now on. Today we're experimenting with the equipment to make sure we got everything right and all the bugs are worked out. But starting next week, if all goes well, then all of our talks will be live streamed to everyone, and they'll be archived so everyone can view them later on. I'll email out the website address. I think I already emailed it out for the list of speakers, but I'll email it out again once we are sure everything's working correctly.
Actually, this is already being live streamed.
Oh, this is already being live streamed. Okay. So as always, no technology, and please take plenty of notes and ask very good questions. We have wonderful speakers who are taking time away from their day to share their wealth of knowledge with you. So that about wraps with the administrative side. So let me introduce our speaker today. Our speaker today is Ivan Buchanan. He's from Mexico, and he's currently an MBA student at Haas, and he's in the process of starting 2 businesses. I think if I say more than that, then I will take away from his talk because there's so much that he has to say that, and I don't want to waste any seconds talking about anything else except giving you that time. So please help me welcome Ivan.
Thank you for that. As Navgit said, I'm from Mexico. I've had experience doing startups both internationally and here in the US. So I'll try to share what's been my background and experiences so far, the struggles I've had and the failures I've had, of course. Feel free to ask me any question at any point. I'm open to that, definitely. I'm gonna start by talking to you about my general background and how I got here to Haas. So I started studying. I majored in mechatronics engineering back in 2006 at a college called Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is located in the northeastern part of Mexico. I then, after graduation, I went into Alpha. Alpha is Mexico's second biggest company, multinational company. And I was doing energy project management for them for around 6 years, if I recall correctly. Yeah, 6 years. So I was doing stuff like wind farms, cogenerations around the world where Alpha's plants were located and they had operations in. Kind of in sync with that, in 2009, I decided to start an e-commerce startup in Mexico called Docs, but I'll talk more about this later on in the presentation. But it was kind of a side project. Obviously, my main focus was on Alpha, but I spent time and kind of a dedication on that e-commerce startup. Operated for 4 years up until the time I came to Haas. As I said, I'm a full-time MBA student, class of 2015. I'm also the co-VP of marketing of the Berkeley Entrepreneurs Association. And as Nafit says, so I started a company called Customato back in and now I'm working on another one called Papyrusly, and I'll speak more about them and the things I've been through so far. So the first round I had with startups was Dogspot. Like I said, it's an e-commerce startup operated from 2009 to 2013. I think it was a great experience. I mean, I'll speak more about it as I go on. Just to give you an insight of the structure that Dogspot had, it was family owned, co-founded by myself, my brother, my wife, and my sister. We basically did it. We all had our full-time jobs and we're doing fairly fine, but we wanted to get the startup experience firsthand, and we wanted to do something good for the world, and this was our way of doing it. We had a passion for dogs and pets in general. We decided let's go for it, let's try it out, and let's see how it goes. So we did not pay ourselves a salary. We basically all of the profits we made after paying back the investment were focused on donations for organizations such as Greenpeace, WWF, and some other local environmental organizations in Mexico. And just as a side note, since this was a side project that all of us had, we outsourced everything. So the website, the backend stuff, everything was outsourced. Nothing was developed by ourselves. So just as a follow-up, I'll speak through 5 main points that I think are worthy lessons learned in this first, as I call it, first round in the startup environment. One is getting funded in non-startup environments, you versus the market, conversion, differentiators as keys, and to always have a vision. Okay, so getting funded in non-startup environments. This was a fairly interesting part of the journey because as I mentioned before, so the business model that we had in mind was nothing very fundable, right? I mean, our profits were gonna go to donations. So we had to recur to some other funding sources. Obviously, this was also 2009, so the startup environment, especially in Mexico, was not as it is right now. Now there's definitely more incubators, more accelerators, and overall a greater awareness of the potential of startups. But at that point, that was practically non-existent. So most startups at that time had 2 options: bank loans with very high interest rates, or going for the friends and family funding round. So as I said, since our startup had a quite different business model in mind, we ended up going for a friends and family round. The second point I want to cover is you versus the market. So one of the things I've learned in all of the startups that I made so far is that unless you have a pre-idea and fairly new, there's always going to be big players out there. And getting the right market entry strategy is key in my opinion. So what we focused on in Dogspot initially was finding a niche or main differentiator to begin with, and through that enter the market, since there were already big players out there. So what we did in that case was we went for that part of the market that the big players didn't want. So basically, we offered high quality premium pet products or dog products. We sold them online. We reduced the overhead costs and stuff like that, and we targeted medium to high income families. Most at this point in time, most of the dog market, pet market in Mexico was mainly driven by cheap Chinese products imported from China. So we saw an opportunity there in bringing from the U.S. and other countries these products and commercializing them in Mexico. The second point, I think that it's also an important one, is conversion. So we found out that understanding the current market dynamics is a really important part of getting a successful business up and running. So as I mentioned, the e-commerce market in Mexico was still fairly young. There were big players, but they were almost all of them focused on brick and mortar type of stores. The general online market was dominated by mistrust. So from the payment perspective and from the whole purchase journey that a user had, there was a general mistrust. So or at this point, the general consumer always thought that he was gonna end up screwed around with the purchase, either through the payment or not receiving the product. So that was one of the challenges that we had to actually deal with. And obviously, early established players had the upper hand. They were already there. They had a presence. If they had some sort of online presence, they already have the upper hand. And we had to compete with those in some or other way. And finally, I think most importantly, there is this big player out there, which is called Mercado Libre, the Mexican eBay. I call it that way. They were actually purchased by eBay a few years ago, and they still operate. But I'd say that they dominate a big chunk of the online market in Mexico. They sell everything there, and people, since they've been in the market so long, people are really trustworthy. They trust them a lot. Just to give you an idea, so 80% initially when we launched, 80% of our sales were going through our Mercado Libre storefront, which meant that we had a loss of 10% margins because they charge a 10% commission for every sale. So that was definitely one of the very first challenges we had to deal with. We wanted to keep that 10% margin, of course, and it was important to us given that our normal margins were around the 30-25% mark, given that we were importing products. So the question was, how do we convert these customer side purchases? So what we did was provide awesome customer service. Definitely our competitors and the big players weren't doing that, and we found that as an opportunity to really mark our brand out there. So what did we do to build this personalized customer service? So as I said, one of the big issues we had was mistrust. So someone went into the website and they said, the website looks very good, it looks young, it looks fresh. It's the kind of website that I want to buy from, but should I buy from it? I've never heard of it. It's the very first time I hear about this company, and many of the transactions actually fell in the medium part of the process. So what we did there is provide very clear and timely communications at every point in the process of the purchase. There was something that told them what was expected from them and what was going to happen in the rest of the process. Once they completed the purchase, we continued the communications with them and ensured that they were always notified where their product was and how long did they have to wait to receive it. Another of the strategies we had is that in every purchase we included the Dogspot swag or Dogspot branding merchandise. So we included like armbands, stickers, stuff like that generally were very well received from the audience and kind of spread the brand that we were trying to get into the market. we in every purchase, especially the ones from Mercado Libre, from the eBay, Mexican eBay, we included a personalized letter such as that one, where we basically thank them for their purchase. We like letting them know that we understood they had options, but we were thankful for choosing our company. And we included a coupon code, which basically kind of incentivized them into making their next purchase from the website rather than from Mercado Libre. So in that, even though we gave them a discount, we kind of converted them back into website customers. And at any point in time, we offer full refunds and item exchanges. We definitely lost some money from that, but it assured that every customer that we had was happy about it. So what did we create with this? An active and loyal community, and Mercado Libre eventually turned out to be our initial conversion and marketing channel, attracting new users from around the country. But after that, they completely used the website and purchased from them. So the next point is differentiators. As I said, our aim was to create a brand where we communicated to the purchaser, we are something fresh, we are something young, we're something playful, just as your dog plays with you or gets happy when you get home. We want you when you get to the site, we want you to feel like the shopping process is just like that. But obviously, we got a very good reception through this marketing strategy, and our small and medium competitors started copying our style and business model. In this case, we diversified and innovated and went into new segments where we knew they would have a hard time copying us. And in this case, we launched a new branch of the business, designing and manufacturing dog clothes. We partnered with local manufacturers and designers, and ended up producing high quality clothes that practically customers couldn't find anywhere else. This one of the things is that this new branch of the business was obviously very tailored for the hardcore pet owners that wanted to dress their dogs and everything. But there was a big market for that, and that was definitely a very good play on our end. And I think this is the last one for dogs, but always have a vision. So I think one of our struggles and failures there was that, so we all had our main jobs, or our main sources of income, and this was kind of a side job, right? A side project. So it was done on our spare time. It didn't receive the focus as a full-time startup, and eventually this backfired on us, right? We didn't get the continuity, we didn't get the longevity that the product would have received, and we didn't have an exit strategy nor an exit vision. So while we had a potential acquirers at that point in time, time went over us, and I had to come to Haas, and we just couldn't do it. We couldn't close any kind of deal with them. And I think this is one of the biggest points. Just I think it's worthy of at certain points in time just assessing where you are standing and what's the next things that you want to do and have to do in order to complete them. So round two was a SaaS platform called Customato. By this time, I was already here at Haas, and so I met other classmates from the same Haas class, and we started working on this project. We still have it online, but let's say that we are now focused on the latter, which I will explain in a few minutes. This is a glimpse of the website. What we were trying to do is create a two-sided market where, as a consumer, you go to this online grocery search engine, and you can find practically anything that you want over there. And this intelligent search engine would give you the best places to shop online for any type of grocery. So we would provide you with comparisons and that sort of information, so that if you decided to buy online, you would be making the best decision for you depending on your location and the grocery or groceries you wanted to buy. And for the grocers, we provided SaaS solutions where they had their storefront within our platform, and that way they could better communicate with specific customers and better tailor their marketing efforts. Just to give you an idea of the structure of this startup, it was co-founded by three of us, diverse backgrounds and diverse set of countries. All three of us has MBA 2015. Zach from the US, Jungwoo from South Korea, and myself from Mexico. And I think we made a fairly good team with different backgrounds: finance, marketing, and engineering, and obviously entrepreneurship. So for this second round, I'm gonna speak mostly about this 5 points. So startup require incredibly varied set of skills, what the customer thinks he wants versus what he actually wants, leveraging an idea in a market not ready for it, startups as an international student, and allocating resources. So as the first of them, startups require incredibly varied skill sets. So we had the advantage at this point that, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we had a diverse team, right? We could code, we could market, we could finance. Maybe we couldn't design exactly. But we had the fairly basic set of tools to get an MVP up and running. One of the things we had to do is to decide what to develop internally and what to outsource. That's definitely one of the big decisions that you have to make early on. And in my personal opinion, it could determine the direction your startup takes. Obviously, it depends on resources and time. So we were studying here at Haas. We were doing our first semester. It's very heavy on coursework and team projects. But we still knew that we had to develop the project ourselves. Otherwise, we would lose control of the code and pushing features and stuff like that.
Could you explain to the class the terms like SaaS and MVP? I'm not sure if everyone's familiar
Sure.
with them.
MVS, minimum viable product. So it's I think I mentioned it afterwards as well. It's a very buggy initial product that you use just to test the concept and validate that there's actually a need out there that wants your product in some or other way. Even though it's buggy, it's ugly, but it still proves a concept. And SaaS is software as a service, and we just I'm trying to think of an example, but we just provide online tools for businesses so that they, by going online, think of it as Shopify, for example, to build storefronts just through a browser. That's what mostly we were referring by SaaS.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay. So I was saying you have to decide what to outsource and what not. In my personal opinion, the downside with outsourcing is that you lose control over your product. So in the case of Customator, we had everything except really coding and design. We started self-learning Ruby on Rails. We already had coding background, but not exactly on a framework that allowed us to really develop a SaaS backend with a front that was worthy of appealing to the general audience. So in November, we started learning Ruby on Rails, and by mid-February, we had an MVP up and running. Like I said, we built the product from scratch, and we decided to outsource the design. We just couldn't do it due to the lack of time and resources within the team. So what the customer thinks he wants versus what he actually wants. This was probably one of the toughest questions that we had to answer, and I don't think we were able to answer it. So my advice, interviews offer a great way to gauge what the need is out there. In our case, it was really tough because our main source of revenue was actually coming from the B2B side. So getting in touch with businesses and doing interviews to them proved to be something much more tough than we were initially planning on. And the interviews definitely can save you a lot of time, but it's something that you have to really plan and really dedicate time into. And really, there's no sure way to find what the customer really wants. Even then, you do the interview, and the customer might tell you something, but it's in some cases it's not actually what they want. So you kind of have to take that information and then use other external inputs of information and just try to come up with a product that, in your opinion, is what they want and present it to themselves. In many cases, we came back to them with a product that was fairly different from what they were asking, but they were still super into it and they wanted it. So my advice, just do it, and definitely the more you know, the better decisions you will make. In the case of Customado, we really couldn't figure it out. The online grocery industry, as you may have seen on the internet, is still evolving. There's still a lot of movement, a lot of startups entering and exiting. And one of the things we found out very late in the cycle is that there's generally a lot of resistance to technology in the grocery industry. So senior management is really into the senior management is old. There's a resistance to tech, even though there's big players such as Amazon Fresh and Instacart already entering as a threat to them, but getting a hold of senior management and convincing them was fairly difficult. And finally, our interviews happened too late in the cycle. So like I said, we produced the MVP around mid-February, and we were doing the interviews mid-summer, something like that. So it was painful, very painful. The next one was leveraging an idea in a market not ready for it, kind of related to what I mentioned before. It's tough. Obviously, you need to educate consumers. So like I said, we were getting in touch with these businesses, and they were into the idea. They were excited about it, and they said, I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And obviously, you couldn't make everything for them. In some cases, they even didn't know what kind of tools and technology were out there. So you actually had to spend meetings and meetings and meetings presenting to them and talking to them about technology and how it has developed. So part of the selling process was actually educating them, which took a lot of time and took a lot of resources. Yeah, and it was a hard time generally, even though there is already a big presence from players such as Amazon Fresh and Instacart, and there's obviously the awareness from the medium to small grocers that there's a threat coming, but still they take too long on their decisions. So what happened with Customado? Our potential customers, they wanted a product, they were super into it, but there was a high resistance to tech, and just because of that cycle of educating them and kind of resisting what we were offering and making like safe moves, getting just a contract for one customer was going to take more than 6 months, which is a lot of time for just one customer. So startups as an international student, it's tough. It's definitely tough. So you are on a visa, which is a limitation. You have a limited time to get something with relative traction to prove the concept. And obviously customers, angels, and VCs need to see full commitment. They obviously see it from the perspective: is this guy really here to stay, or is he just for 2 years and then he's going to move on? What gives me the real encouragement to sign a contract with this company if there's actually not that commitment? So my advice is, if you want to do it, just go all in. Risk aversion is very difficult to handle in a startup environment. What we ended up doing was we committed the summer, we committed the rest of the school year being the second year, and we committed the extra year of OPT. We are into whatever we end up deciding as a startup, but it's a decision that definitely you have to make, and it gives angels and VCs the idea that at least you're gonna give whatever you have to make it work. And finally, for the second round is allocating resources. So we allocated almost all of the summer on the idea. We did conference calls, we did networking events, pitch events, competitions. We were out there as much as we could. But by the end of the summer, we evaluated our progress and saw the life cycle just of getting a contract, and saw that it wasn't in sync with the timeline that we had as international students. So like I said, in our case, we continually assess the progress and the expectations that the team had. We produced the MVP. We kept it online. It's still online, and we're still having users, and we're still receiving inquiries. But we started working in other ideas because that wasn't actually going to synchronize with the rest of our timeline. So round three is Papyrusly. It's a worldwide multi-language publishing startup. Started in 2014. Basically, we started the very last 3 weeks of the summer. This is a glimpse of it. As I said, this is an MVP, so it's ugly. It's not graphically appealing. It's not aesthetic, but it's a product that is already up there and it's working. So what we're trying to do is create a global platform where any type of writer can get their book online and translate it into every language that we operate in. So for example, this is the US or English version of the platform, and we have stories from people around Latin America and South Korea, which are the markets that we are currently operating. We are like a month away from expanding to Japan, and we're doing fairly well on our user base. We're growing every day, and I think we basically followed the same advice that I said before. We tried finding a niche. Obviously, we have big competitors, but we tried to enter in markets that they, at least for the moment, they are blind into. To give you an idea of the structure of Papyrusly, it's co-founded by three of us. Two from South Korea, which is Jung-Woo Kim and his wife. His wife is a writer, so this is how it actually all happened and how we identified the need. And it's also a diverse set of backgrounds: literature, marketing, entrepreneurship, and engineering entrepreneurship. So in round three, I'm going to touch back into some of the points that I mentioned before. I think the very first two of them, just to give them the perspective from this new startup. So startups as an international student, you versus the market, to MVP or not to MVP, marketing and biz dev, and finally failure. So startups as an international student, like I said, it's tough. Customers and angels and VCs need to see the full commitment. You need to find your edge. In our case, and for this project, it was our diverse nationalities and backgrounds. So we took advantage of that, and we initially launched, for example, in Latin America, which I'm from, and South Korea, where they are from, and that kind of gave us more credibility. In worst case is that we return to our countries and we keep operation of the business from those countries. And we used it to prove that there's a market somewhere. Not exactly in the US, maybe not exactly in Silicon Valley, but there's a market out there and it's growing fast. And as an outcome, we initially received funding from Lang's head of Latin America, and we were growing based on that. So you versus the market. Like I said, there will always be big players out there. The strategy to follow and enter into the market is key. Like I said, we found a niche or main differentiator, and like to what I said before, we went in for what they didn't want. So we went to the non-English speaking countries. We focused initially on South Korea and Latin America, and proved that there's a market out there, even outside the US and Silicon Valley. So to MVP or not MVP, my advice is yes, launch your MVP as soon as possible. It's definitely worth it. And I think the second point is you will have the edge over others by doing live testing. So you will gain users, and by that you will be able to push features or do A/B testing with those users that will give you more insights than a regular interview, offline interview will give you. In parallel, obviously, you can do the interviews and immediately implement those insights or findings that you get. And one very important advice that I would say, once you build an MVP, so use Facebook. Facebook's targeted marketing is your friend. Test everything. It's fairly cheap. It's fairly easy to use. You get very advanced set of tools to target exactly the users that you want. I'd say that for Papyrusly, all of our marketing currently is being done through Facebook, Facebook's targeted ads, and that's how we're growing our user base. And yeah, I wouldn't imagine doing a startup like this without that, because it just gives you immediate access to its worldwide database of users. So we created a simple and buggy MVP during the summer. Thousands of users are now using it. In parallel, we are working on additional features and UI overhauls, and we work in parallel through our MVP and our Facebook community to do the global community management. So for marketing and biz dev, just strategize and test your marketing campaigns. Make sure you have a clear measurement of your user acquisition cost. At the end, that's where your funding or your resources, if you're both bootstrapping, will go. And just set an objective and iterate. We do a lot of testing, and that's how our user graphs normally, you can look at them. And but that's fine, because every time that there's a spike, you learn about it and you learn what users actually want. And failure at the end is awesome. I think every failure teaches you something, and really we wouldn't be where we are right now if it wasn't for that. That's it. And if you have any questions.
There was a part when you were mentioning about outsourcing,
Mhm.
particularly, I guess, outsourcing coding. I was kind of wondering about that, because I heard from many different other entrepreneurs, like especially in the mobile app industry,
Yeah.
that when they actually go about outsourcing, they notice that it actually takes a lot more of their time and a lot more of their effort, because they notice that many of the people on the other end don't really understand completely what they actually want to build. Have you noticed that in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't outsource coding, but we outsourced design, and let me tell you, we had a painful month and a half just for the design part. And it's exactly what you said. They don't understand. They generally take a lot of time because you're generally far away from them. The communication is not fluid. So in our case, we actually outsourced with a company outside the US, and we had a time difference, and it made things very difficult to work with. Yeah, and I think the mobile app environment is very tricky because of that. Many companies tend to outsource that part. My advice, what we're doing right now in Papyrusly, we already have mobile apps out there in the stores. But what we did is there are actually frameworks that allow you to wrap in HTML5 your MVP. So basically, you go to if you use the Papyrusly app, you'll use it as a native app on your Android or iOS device, and you'll see practically the same device, just on the responsive mode of operation. But that allows you to get a mobile app very, very quickly. And then as you prove concept and get funding, then you allocate resources into developing the actual native app from scratch.
You mentioned that you had a background in coding, but then you did the MVP in 5 months by learning Ruby on Rails.
Yeah.
Like, how much of coding did you know before you?
How much?
Like-
Not much. So, like I said, I studied mechatronics engineering. There, I learned basic Java. In my spare time, I learned HTML and CSS, but they weren't actually like database languages that we could actually develop this MVP. So let's say that I had the baseline, but not exactly. I'd say like 25% there. It was definitely more that some other people might have. But I think the advantage, I still promote Ruby on Rails a lot, because there's a lot of information out there, and it's a matter of wanting to learn it, because there's a lot of help. There's a lot of already established tutorials that you can follow, and there's a lot of prepackaged code out there, and I think it's fairly manageable to get your learnings on a language such as that.
Yeah, one part you mentioned about measuring user acquisition costs. How did you guys like determine the value of each user gained versus how much you took it to adopt?
So initially, like I said, we have done a lot of testing out there. We have more trial and error than educated testing. Our current user acquisition costs are around, if I recall correctly, around 30 cents. So for 30 cents, we get a user sign up, which is very good. But it was trial and error. We tried a lot of campaigns. Some were giving us $1, some were giving us 80 cents. Eventually, we found the right communication. I mean, the product was the same, right? The thing is, so what kind of message does the user actually wanna hear, or what gives them the better sense of the idea of the product that you have? And one of the challenges that you have in Facebook is that you practically you have I don't remember the character count, but it's, let's say, 140 characters, which is like a sentence, and that's it. That's what you have to deliver your marketing message. Besides that, you have a photograph that you have to kind of put some time into it so that it's appealing to the user. But besides that, it's about nailing exactly the message that you want to give in a sentence, which is fairly challenging. Once we did the testing, we start setting different objectives. Eventually, we got to the 40 or 50 cent per user mark, and we said, can we squeeze it anymore? And we tried to do additional testing until we got it to 30, and we've been operating since at that point.
When you were funded for Tirelessly, what stage were you at? Do you have an idea, or did you already have your?
Yeah, we had the MVP. We already had launched in South Korea and Latin America, and we had around 3,000 users, I think, 3,000, 4,000, something like that. Yeah, so we already had our Facebook groups already had like 10,000 in South Korea and Mexico and Latin America already had like 10,000 followers, and as user signups we had around 3,000, and we already had like through the Google Analytics information, we already had a good amount of page views and user engagement stats, and that's mainly what we use to back up our numbers.
And now, are you seeking more investment? Or
Yeah,
what
yeah,
are
we
your
are.
Next steps?
We are. I think that with what we have right now, we'll do fine in expanding to Japan. We have, I think, 10 interns right now working with us, and our next steps are expanding to Japan within a month and a half. We already have a US website, which is what you saw the picture of. But we haven't really marketed that one. We actually want to build a presence outside the US. Since the big players are here, we actually want to build something outside and get something up and running, and then go into the US.
Sorry, before you got funding for Pirates, were you primarily marketing through Facebook from the start?
Yeah,
or?
right from the start. Okay. Yeah, and we were obviously using our own resources, bootstrapping and everything.
And how was the traction? Like how long did you notice it took to like actually get to, what was it, like 3,000 users or so?
Let me see if I think I can remember the timeline on that. Where do I have the graph? Did I miss it? So let's say this was end of August, something like that. We did some trials. There were more than those, but these were the ones that I highlighted at that point. I think we were at 3,000 a month and a half away, something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit more about why you guys chose the strategy of kind of launching in other countries before going to the US?
Sure. So I think the advantage since we are native from those areas or countries, we kind of understood the market. We understood what people wanted there, and we obviously knew that. For example, in my case, I knew that Latin America needed something like this, because the way that the publishing industry works there is that most of the books that are actually out there are translations from very big books, and besides that, that's it, right? So within Latin America, it's difficult to know other authors or read other stories that are outside of your own community or country if you're lucky. So it was kind of through that idea, like we have the information about our particular countries or areas, and let's exploit that. I think every small startup in a big market is always afraid of actually entering, for example, a market such as the US and going head to head with the big players, right? We don't exactly want to, at this point, want to go head to head with our big competitors out there, because we know if they dedicate a set of resources, they'll just crush us, right? So we want to get actually a loyal fan base, and afterwards we can then better penetrate the market.
Going back to DogSpot, I was wondering if you could talk about maybe what kind of revenues you guys had and if you guys
Sure.
were generating a profit.
So let me start by telling you. So the initial investment that we went for through the friends and family round was 20,000, and that one, since it was an online business, it wasn't very heavy on investment. It was mostly inventory and online resources, and based on those 20,000 from our own money, we put like 1,500 per person, something like that. So times 4, that was 6,000 out of the 20, and the rest was funded from external sources. And in terms of revenues, if I remember correctly, what we were donating every month through to the organizations was around 5,000 to 7,000, something like that.
Every month.
Every month.
So what was your strategy to finding a buyer, and what ultimately maybe led to the failure or whatever?
That's one of the things I see as I said, as a failure. I think it was a mistake on my. So I was the CEO of that, and I completely ignored that part. I completely ignored it. By that time I was applying to business school and doing essays, interviews, and getting scholarships and stuff like that. So, and plus my full-time job at Alpha. So by that time I kind of relegated DogSpot into the rest of the co-founders, and eventually I realized it was already summer, and we had to do something about it. And we had a set of potential acquirers that work with us in some or other way. But then the negotiations got complicated because they wanted something and we wanted something, and we wanted to keep the branding as it was, and we wanted to kind of, obviously we didn't want to for the company to keep the same business model as it had, because that was impossible, especially if you're buying the company. But we wanted to keep some of its essence, and we couldn't do the negotiations in 2 months, and I think that's what ended up breaking everything. It was stubbornness on our end and the lack of vision.
How do you describe the startup market in Latin America? Do you think it's promising? I mean, like on the one side, you can argue that you have a lot of like emerging economies, but on the other hand, like for example, like I'm from Mexico as well, and I don't see there's a lot of people willing to invest in those startups because we don't have that culture. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We have already talked with some investors or accelerators in Mexico and Latin, in Mexico mostly, and now there's kind of a bigger push towards that, but we're still years behind. That's true, and there's definitely I feel like there's an interest, especially from Latin Americans, to invest in Latin America. But one thing is said and the other thing is actually doing it, right? And I think that that's a discrepancy. We have the advantage that bigger accelerators such as 500 startups and stuff like that are already in Mexico, and they have a presence there, and they're trying to get investors, even if they're not from Latin America, but from the rest of the world through their programs. But there's still very few of them out there.
All right, one more question, and then that's it.
Like, would you consider that it would be a good business to, I don't know, to start like a VC or something in Latin America to try to like actually like fund, like invest in projects for people?
I think it could be a good opportunity. I think that what I see as lacking in Latin America is that maybe it's the way we are, or that we have grown up. But we are still very risk averse, so we want to invest in something kind of more short,
Yeah.
a short bet, rather than something that could work, but maybe it's just. So I think that it's a matter of the way of analyzing things and thinking about it.
All right, please help me thank Ivan for his time. And if you have any more questions, I'm sure Ivan wouldn't mind sticking around for a few minutes to answer them. Make sure you turn in your homework, and if